All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you. And thank you for joining and welcome to our webinar today between Push Analytics and HubSpot. We have here myself, Moustafa with Push Analytics, and Sam Daniel, Super Sam with HubSpot. We're going to be talking to you obviously about, tracking, a new tracking era, Google Analytics 4, which is a big thing. Also some of like how to use HubSpot, and then beyond, how do you incorporate that into your full data strategy. My name is Moustafa. I'm president of Push Analytics. We're a full service digital agency. We do ads, process, a lot of process stuff, which is pretty cool, CRM and more. We started off actually that the reason why we have analytics in the name is because data is at the core of everything we do, because we believe that the only true way, and even though we're business people and analytics people at the same time, but we believe that the only true way to drive real meaningful success and growth in business is through data. And we started off, the first thing we did was growth ads using data-driven methodology, and we were able to drive triple-digit growth in some cases, sustained for some clients in that space. So that's at the DNA of everything we do. That's how we ended up here. We have extensive background. I personally have extensive background servicing SMBs, working with SMBs and corporate, clients of all sizes, the enterprise level, mid-sized businesses, the whole gamut. We develop processes to help people organize and grow, optimize and grow, and then again, I personally have extensive B2B and service enterprise experience, at enterprise level. And, we work with different businesses across a lot of different industries and help them, too many to count, but whether it's construction, service, e-commerce, healthcare, aerospace, in some cases, manufacturing. There's a lot of different industries that we do and work with. And we're a top tier HubSpot agency, platinum tier partner. So.
Thank you, Moustafa. I am Sam Daniel. I am a channel account manager at HubSpot. Shorthand for that is CAM. So Sam the CAM is kind of how I brand myself. Coming up on 5 years here at HubSpot in February. Loved every minute of it. I've learned so much. Just an amazing company to work for. I am in the partner side of the business. I did do direct selling at HubSpot. I've since moved to managing partners like Moustafa. Moustafa and Push are very humble. They were one of my top tiering partners last year. They basically went from an untiered partner to gold to platinum extremely quickly, and are now looking at the next tier of diamond, which is super exciting. So I also have a cat named Dusty, who I'm obsessed with. She might be lurking in the background at some point. And I live in Providence, Rhode Island, with my wife as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Mm-hmm. So let's, we also like to get, pretend we're all kind of in a room in person, which sometimes we do, but pretend we're all in a room in person. We like to just get a feel for the audience as well. And we did ask some questions before, so I'm actually first going to share that with everybody. So we had asked people about their experience with Google Analytics. So, we have a mix here. A lot of people are experienced with Universal Analytics, the old one, but not Google Analytics 4. A lot of people are beginners, which is good. That's a good place to be. And some people are moderate, so that's good too. It was very interesting that not one person, at least as of when we pulled this, we had people signing up till the last minute, but not one person put expert. We actually had to recheck the filters to kind of like make sure. So we hear you. I know a lot of people have qualms on GA4, but hopefully we can help you here today. So the other thing was HubSpot experience. Again, good mix here. Some people are using it. Some people are experienced. Some are moderate. Some are beginners. So we have a good mix here. Some aren't using it. So good mix here. Lots of HubSpot users. Good stuff. Good to see. And then, departments, we kind of tried to extrapolate a lot of people in the marketing side, which is excellent. And we have other departments as well. Some people were just unknown, or other sales, titles, same thing. A big mix of people from marketing executives, VPs, directors, managers, executives, founders, associates, all the way evenly distributed. So what is going on, right? So how do we get here? How do we start off? How did things get here? So what happened? Well, Google Analytics has been around for a long time. And there was no major updates for years, like over half a decade, right? And then finally in October 2020, for various reasons, Google introduced Google Analytics 4. Initially, Google took the carrot approach, and they were like, trying to motivate people, like, you're going to improve your ROI, you're going to get a good understanding of how your business works. We encourage you to use it, blah, blah, blah. And people kind of just went like, breaking news, Google. Nobody cared, right? People just were comfortable with UA and nobody really wanted to switch, and people kind of didn't like it. So then finally in March 16, 2022, Google laid down the hammer. And they were like, well, people aren't shifting. So they just announced that, you know what, we're going to stop processing your data. We're going to cut you off on July 1st, 2023. And also historical data is going to be lost as well, which is something people don't notice. This hasn't happened yet, but it's been announced for July 2024. So that's something to watch out for. You will lose all of your historical data on July 2024. Let us know if you need help backing it up or a strategy for that. But anyhow, so people then, you know, by the way, the dates, if anybody here has GA360, the dates are a little bit different. They're about a year later. So you would still have access to GA360 for a while. Anyways, people kind of went like this, like, you know, people didn't really like Google Analytics, like run for cover. I don't want to use it. I hate it. I can't tell you how many consults we've gotten on. People like, I hate Google Analytics 4. Google Analytics 4 sucks. We don't know how to use it. I mean, even from the early days, we were teaching and showing agencies how to use it themselves because they don't even know how to use it and to bring it up with clients. So, and you know, the way you can kind of quickly know which version of Google Analytics you're on, the one on the left, that's what Google Universal Analytics looks like, the old one. The one on the right, it's what Google Analytics 4 looks like, the new one. So, I mean, nobody should be on the left one anymore. If for some reason you are, because the deadline is, you know, a rolling deadline, maybe there's a couple of accounts that still have it, but you really need to be on GA4. But pretty much nobody should have GA at this point. But this is how you know if you had it before. So, there's a lot of things. Obviously, people had to transition. There's a lot of changes in GA4. There's changes in tracking, changes in metrics, changes in reporting, and more. And we're going to be talking through that and walking through that so you kind of understand, you know, how we got here, what happened, what that looks like, and how to take best advantage of that data. All right. Now, one thing is, why should we care though, right? Before we talk about this change, why is this important? Like, why is it important for me to know all this and understand all this? Well, let's look at your tech stack, like just in very broad general terms, right? You have like things like the promotional type tools. So like your ad platforms that you're using, you know, marketing, whatever, right? You have your digital presence, which is once people get from somewhere to your digital assets, which is really your website and your apps, you know, right? Or your websites and your apps. Okay, if you have multiple websites. And then you have like your backend, which is once they've interacted with your brand in some way or your company in some way that you know, maybe they fill out a form, now you're servicing them. So that's again like your CRM, like HubSpot, like in ERP, use NetSuite, use Oracle, use whatever ERP that you might use. That's all like kind of like backend part of the tech stack. Customer doesn't see it, but it plays a very big role in servicing them. You know, then there's execution and tracking. So Google really Analytics sits on the tracking side of your digital presence. So, I mean, your execution is like whatever you're hosting your website, wherever you're hosting your app, all this stuff, but Google helps you track people on your digital presence. Okay. So, that's really important because it gives you the number one thing that's most valuable today in the digital business, which is data, right? And data is extremely valuable because if you think about it, with a lot of business being done online now, I mean, past decade, but you know, only growing, right? A lot of business being done online now. I mean, not having data is almost like you have a store, like, you know, a retail store, and you don't even look who walks in the door. You have no idea. Like you have blindfold on, you're standing at the register with a blindfold. That's basically not having data these days, right? I mean, when you have a store, you can see the people. When you have an online store, the only way to see people is through data. So you're essentially, by not looking at data, you literally have, you're like running Macy's or something and you're wearing a blindfold on. I mean, not really a good strategy. So data is very important to be able to drive decisions. So having the data and knowing how to use that to drive the decisions. And then that actually, it's kind of iterative. That gives you more data, which then lets you drive more decisions, which then gives you more data, and then you keep going. We're going to talk a lot about this later. Okay. And there's a lot of types of decisions you might want to grow, like, you know, how do we grow our blog activity? How do we increase ad revenue? How do we monetize different things? Like, you know, we want to make decisions around all these. And this data needs to really inform all this. And data is the key thing that you can look at to see if the levers you're pulling are moving in the right direction or not, and adjust accordingly. Okay. So with that said, with how important that is, obviously GA4 is tracking a big part of what we're doing. So it's a big part of our data strategy. So let's talk about like the GA changes now. So we have account level changes, metrics changes, reporting, and UI changes. So let's first start with account levels changes so we understand what's happening. So if you are familiar with universal analytics, you might be familiar with some concepts. The first one being accounts. So account is usually your company. If you have different departments or divisions, it might be different things, but usually it's your company. If you are a service provider like ourselves, you're going to be in a lot of different accounts. Each one's a different company. So that still exists in GA4. That's about the same. Then you have the properties. So in universal analytics, you had accounts, and each account could have multiple properties. I have the star there for a reason. I'm going to explain why in a second, but each account can have multiple properties. And in GA4, the concept of properties does exist, but it's a little bit different. I mean, usually you would use properties like maybe you have different websites or something or whatever. So in GA4, it does exist, but it's slightly different. UA had views, and if anybody's used views, I mean, well, let me first tell you, GA4 does not have views, which, again, if you've used views, then it's kind of like good riddance if you understood like the nuances behind it. Like views were a way to like kind of filter your data and have different views, but it was a permanent filtering, so you couldn't undo it. So if you accidentally had a view that cut out a portion of your traffic and you forgot to make another view that accounted for all your traffic unfiltered, you literally lost all that data on that filtered traffic forever. It was a very common thing that we had to deal with. I mean, which there was no retroactive solution for, but we had to deal with people that had views that cut off too much data and they can't get it back, and we just have to fix it moving forward. So views are gone, and GA4 has a concept now of data streams, which does not really correspond to anything in universal analytics. The reason I put the stars is because the stars are where the tracking code is based out of in the respective platforms. So this is kind of important to understand. In universal analytics, properties, you got a tracking code that you had to put on your website per property. In GA4, you get it per data stream, right? So it's actually one level down, which is different, right? So that takes a little bit of understanding when you first get into it. And with that, like, what is a data stream anyways? Well, I mean, it's just different places where you can get data from, right? When you first open up a Google Analytics account, it's going to ask you start collecting data, pick where you want to collect data from, and they're going to give you the code for that data stream. So it's either web or Android or iOS app. And they're going to give you that code and you can collect that. And the cool thing here is that you can actually get your website data and your app data. So not like your mobile website, but your actual, like if you have an app on the Apple Store or Google Play Store, you get your both data sets into one reporting tool, into one GA property, which is really nice. And you can have a ton of data streams, up to 50 on a given property, with any combination up to 30 of them being app data streams. So again, pretty cool. It's a little bit more flexible this way. And the fact that you can get both things in is a new thing, like app and website. And we're going to talk about why that happens now, and it didn't happen before in a little bit. But one cool thing, so while you don't have views, which again, were maybe some people a lot of people use them, but they were sometimes more trouble than they were worth, just the way they were executed. You can filter by data stream name, which is something a lot of people don't necessarily know. So you don't have to have two different properties if you just want to be able to filter by data stream, because we do see that sometimes when people are like, okay, I'm going to make multiple properties because I just want to be able to view these things separately, but then it's kind of harder to view them combined. So if it makes sense for things to be in the same property, you can just have them in two different data streams and filter that way. You can have multiple website data streams, so summary of account level changes. There's no views. Data streams are now a big thing. It's a new thing. It's a big thing. Tracking code is actually one level deeper, and you can bring in your app and website information into one place, which is very cool. And as a best practice, and we're going to be throwing up this best practice light bulb here a lot, just to give you guys something to think through and work through. Make sure you have a clear strategy on where you have your properties and your data streams with clear nomenclature. We run into this a lot, and you want to document, like, I have 5 properties because I have these different, websites that, our organization runs or whatever. And here's the data streams under each one. You got to have that clear strategy documented somewhere. And you also want to test, if you have multiple data streams, you want to test your tracking code to make sure that there's no double tracking or overlap. And we just recommend to test in general. I mean, if you have a simple implementation, usually that's fine. But if you're doing, but you still want to like test just to make sure there's no element on your website that interacts in a different way, or like maybe you have a different type of form, or you have certain React code or something that like trips up some tracking. So you always want to make sure to test that. And again, we mentioned that we're gonna have a kind of like a need help here. And so if you need help, we're going to put up these QR codes. So if you want help reviewing your properties, viewing tracking functionality, doing any of that, we do have a meeting link specifically for this webinar that you can use. So you can grab it from the QR code here. All right, now let's go into metrics and tracking changes. So again, a lot of people here said, we don't know if we trust we're looking at the right thing, or we don't even know if we can trust the data we're looking at. And understanding the metrics is very, very important to being able to do that. We run into this a lot. We do this like day in, day out with a lot of different types of businesses. We're into a lot of e-commerce, Google Analytics, like a lot of different places where it's like, you really need to know exactly what's happening. Otherwise your decisions are flawed, because the only thing worse than not having data is actually having the wrong data. So, so in the example I gave, you're not only blindfolded, you're blindfolded and wearing a VR that's, giving you somewhere else, and that you think you're in, but you're not, so it's actually worse. But anyhow, so Universal Analytics was hit-based tracking. The hits were grouped into sessions. So hits were just like an interaction. It was mainly like page views. They were grouped into sessions, which is how everybody knows sessions, but a session is just basically a bundle of hits, right? And then there was a concept of events, and I'm going to put an asterisk on that for a second later here. They existed, and then it just mainly relied on this hits model. Now GA4 simplifies this model, and nearly everything is an event. It might actually be everything. And you'll hear a lot, like if you look at Google's Docs or whatever, event-based tracking, because everything is an event. First things first, like, why did they do this? Where did this come from? Well, what I mentioned earlier about now you can combine your application and your website data into one place. Well, the reason you couldn't do it before is because, well, one of the reasons, well, they don't have the tool for it, but also they're two inherently different things, right? If you're using the hit-based model, which just relies on web pages views mainly, mobile apps don't work that way, right? I mean, there's no web page concept in a mobile app, right? So people are either like sharing something, signing up for something, clicking a button, like a photo, whatever. So that wasn't very useful. So you had to have two different schemas, two different systems. So you would use Firebase tracking, and it would be like kind of completely separate. So they moved, and one of the reasons they moved to this event-based model is it's kind of platform agnostic, and it allows you to track mobile and web in the same platform. So once you kind of understand that, you realize that is a pretty cool change. I mean, it does make sense, and events are very flexible, so you don't really lose anything. So you'll kind of see that, and actually inherently it makes sense. So this is again from the Google documentation as well. Okay, cool. The events will have so what is an event, right? So events, have a name, right? Like button click, whatever, and they have parameters. It can be up to 25 parameters, and the parameters can represent details about that event. So as an example, maybe you have an event called form submission. Somebody submits a form, and you maybe put a parameter that you want to pass in the form ID, because you have a lot of different forms on your website. You want to pass in a form ID. Maybe it's like, hey, we're gonna do a book consult event, right? Because this is the form people use to book a consult. Maybe you have a download event. People download certain things from your website, and maybe there's different parameters there. So maybe you have file name. Maybe you're downloading our GA4 webinar slides, and maybe there's you put file type PDF, because you want to be able to like see the different types of file people's downloaded, and maybe you have different versioning of the files, so you just want to track that. So it's like the first version is what people downloaded. So again, you can have 25 of these. It's very customizable, and you can pass a lot of different event parameters in there. So the concept of events, like I said, did exist in UA. However, it's not really the same thing. UA events were less clean, they were more rigid, and they were kind of optional, not really the foundation of tracking. It's not exactly the same thing. So you're going through that, there's 4 types of events here. So automatically created events, enhanced events, recommended events, custom events. The first 2, I'm just listing how Google says them, but the first 2 and the last 2 are kind of like the same-ish. So for the automatically created ones, it's stuff that's enabled by default. Everything is an event. So that includes page views, session starts, clicks, everything that you get is an event. So it's stuff that Google has enabled by default. The enhanced measurement events is also an automatic, but only if you have it enabled. And it's at the data stream level. So which is where the tracking code is based out of. So, and again, as a best practice, always check to see what events you have configured and test your events to make sure they work as you're anticipated. Even though they're automatic, you want to test them, make sure they work as anticipated. So this is what that settings page looks like. It's in the It's in the data stream settings, and you can see, different options here. And again, you would definitely want to test them to make sure, but these are like, call them semi-automatic events. And then you have recommended events and custom events. So they're both kind of the same. The thing is, recommended events is essentially Google has like a dictionary of the possible events that you could do that are common, that you can kind of look at for ideas or just nomenclature ideas, and you can follow that. You still have to develop it on your own, implement it on your own. They do not implement it for you. You have to have your developers or whatever get that implemented and configured. But these are like really good to give you like really good context on what's happening. So some cool events, for example, are like login event. You can have an event on your Google Analytics that tracks when people log into your portal, whatever like login piece you have on your website. And you can even pass like a anonymized login token. Do not pass like their first name and last name into Google as a parameter. That is against Google terms and conditions. We have a slide on that. But you can pass like an anonymized token. You can use that later to, let's say, join with your HubSpot data. So maybe you pass in people that with their HubSpot ID, for example, and then on the back end, you can combine data from HubSpot to Google Analytics to see what they did before they logged in, right? Purchase, refund, search. If you have a search bar in your website for like a blog or whatever, search our blog, you're going to see when people use that. Share, maybe you want to see like when people share stuff, where they shared it from. You got different parameters like, they click the Facebook share button, the LinkedIn share button, whatever. So different events in here. And then custom events is basically, you can do whatever it's just them telling you can do whatever you want, essentially. 25 parameters, which is a lot. And, we could have events, configure them however way you want, using your developers or whatever. And remember, like I was saying earlier, do not ever collect personal identifiable information. That is against Google's terms and conditions, which we link right here. And don't do that because they can suspend your account. So don't collect somebody's email. You can collect that on your side, but don't give it to Google Analytics. Like, don't pass it as a parameter. Somebody's email, somebody's name, somebody's last name. They don't want to know that. You can put like an anonymous ID, but not like something that if they were to look at, they would identify a person. They don't want to be liable for that. And as a best practice, you want to make sure you have a master event documentation plan for your business. We run into this a lot. People don't know what events they set up or what they should be looking at. So you want to make sure you have that before you set up any events. And you can also, as another cool best practice, if you're using HubSpot, which Sam will talk about a little later, you can have custom behavioral events in HubSpot that correspond to certain GA4 events. So that's pretty cool, and one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later. So again, you have 4 types of events: the default ones, the ones that are automatic if needed, a guide for events you might want to add, and anything else you could add. And events, again, you really want to set up your events. It helps you big time in Google Analytics. And Google Tag Manager is a very useful place to organize events for a lot of implementations. It used to be, it was around. It wasn't necessarily as useful with Universal Analytics, but now when they rebuilt Google Analytics, it's very useful to use Tag Manager to manage some of this. So again, that's a lot. If you need help, let us know. Book a session. Again, if you want to talk about events, you want to talk about strategizing your events, having a master plan, implementing events, set up behavior and events in HubSpot, Google Tag Manager. We're going to leave this up. So let's keep going. Difference in metrics. Okay, so there's a lot of different types of metrics, different changes in metrics, sessions, bounces, users, and I'll go through this quickly. So we jump into some of like the comparison and stuff like that. So for the differences in metrics, sessions, the definition of session changed a little bit. The main thing is it doesn't time out at midnight anymore, where it used to. So if you showed up at 11:59 to 12:01, it used to be 2 sessions on Universal Analytics. That's not the case anymore. So if you're looking at data from across different things, not the same. We have the explanation for that here. Bounces are sessions that didn't engage, like by definition, right? In GA4, there's the more explicit concept of engagement. And the definition of engagement like varies between the platforms, right? So in UA, a session with an interaction after visiting is what's considered like a non-bounced session. So that's usually a page view. So what happened is if you had a single page website, your bounce rate was always like 90% or 100% because there's nothing else for them to do, but that's not really indicative of anything. You could change it with events, but GA4 solved that out of the box, where now anything that has lasted 10 seconds or longer, even if they've only visited one page, will count as an engaged session or a non-bounce session. So radically different here for depending on your implementation. So again, if you're looking at numbers, if you're comparing like 2 years ago what your UA numbers were on your bounce rate to what they are now in GA, you're not looking at apples to apples. You're not looking at the same thing. All right. And we have that in here, which we will share this as well. So users mean different things in GA versus UA4. It's the same thing used on the UI, but it's actually two different metrics. So in UA, the primary metric is total users. In GA4, the primary metric is active users. And they say it right here, even though they're not the same thing. So there could be some discrepancies, even though it'll say users, but it actually, when you highlight it, it tells you that they mean active users. It's very confusing. I don't know why they did it that way, but it's just something to know, again, if you're trying to identify discrepancies and you can't trust the information you're looking at. Okay. There is no more goals in GA4. If you were using goals, you can use events and mark them as conversions. So, again, everything is an event. You can mark it as conversion here. Again, this is easier to do, quick and easy. You might not be able to do 100% of things that you did from UA, but honestly, I think most things you can do with creative use of events. But again, it's just a different way that they have the feature. So again, metrics are different. Sessions don't time out at midnight. Users have a different nomenclature. Bounce rate is completely different because the concept of engagement is different. Google Analytics also actively spells out engagement rate, or engaged sessions as a thing mentioned. Actually, in the beginning, they didn't have bounce rate. They just had engaged sessions, but I think they added bounce rate later. And then there's no goals, but can use conversions. And we have a cool hot link here for the metrics. Cool. And then we have, reporting and UI changes. This really trips people up. So it's not the same exact reporting, but some of the items are there, but in a different place. So this is a diagram. I didn't make this diagram, but this is a diagram that I found that I wanted to share, which kind of showed roughly where things were on the old Google Analytics, what they correspond to the new one. Again, it's not exactly the same reports, but like generally, if you're just trying to find things, a lot of people had muscle memory. Like they knew to go into like acquisition channel reports, for example. It's like the most common report on UA, and it's just like hard to get that muscle memory back for GA4. So not the same. Some of the items are there, but in different places. But then there's like some cool features too that are new that are good. So one of them is the comparison feature. So this is somebody had asked about comparisons. So there's the little add comparison button here that you'll find in GA4. And when you come in here, you can build up to 5 different groups with 5 different conditions to compare them against each other. So as an example, if let's say I wanted to look at all my users versus my users that are in the US versus my users that are not in the US. So this is like kind of, that, and this is only like a few clicks to do this. So this is really easy and easy to do. And it was something that wasn't before. And you can, again, add up to 5 parameters in each. So maybe you want to do something more nuanced, like I want to look at people in the US that also use Apple. So you can do that as well. So 5 comparative groups, 5 parameters each. Really cool thing is the GA4 Explore tool. So we're going to come in here. I could talk about this forever, but I'm going to go a little fast here. But we're going to put the GA4 Explore tool. So this is a new thing. It's not exactly a report, it's different, but it allows you to like freeform explore. There's tons of things you can do here, but the cool one is that I'm going to show is freeform. So freeform really allows you to do this path type exploration where you can kind of see like what people did and then what did they do after and what they do after. In UA, that was really clunky to do. There was like one report, it wasn't that great. This is very dynamic. You can sit here and I don't have room, but you can click through like 10 of these and come up with like step 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like what did people do on the first step, on the second step, on the third step, on the fourth step? Very useful. You've used this a lot in audits and with clients and where they're trying to do analysis and be like, okay, we had a bunch of people that filled out this form, but what did they do to get there? And we work it backwards. Or you create a segment of people that fill out that form and you work it backwards and see like what did they do. And when you understand that everything is an event, this is easier to understand because every page view is an event. They do allow you to look at like the page that was viewed also. You could change this drop down here, but it always starts with a session start because that's the first event that happens. Okay, and then there's also the quick feature here on the search query. So you can actually type in here how many users did the US get last week, for example, and it pulls that up. This was actually before ChatGPT. This feature has been out, but just fun fact. It's something they never really mentioned, but it's cool to like get a quick answer. Okay. All right. So that's kind of on the reporting side. Again, it's different reporting. Things are there, but they're in different places. There's up to 5 parameters, 5 comparative groups. You have the Explore tool, which is incredibly powerful. I mean, we can do a whole thing on the Explore tool. It's incredibly powerful. You can use it to do a lot of freeform exploration and go from there. They also, there's other changes, like they don't store IP addresses anymore. A lot of these are privacy based. There's like more ability to limit privacy data. There's data retention policies now. The max that you could put it up to is 14 months, which in which case after that, they don't retain certain pieces of information. So as a best practice, we highly recommend to store data externally in a database. More important than ever now, you want to be able to, have access and control over as much data as possible. And they're just kind of more privacy minded right now because they got, I think, a little roughed up by the EU, and they had to make some changes. So again, if you need help, we got our link here. Book a call if you want to discuss anything on reports, warehousing strategy, warehousing build out, universal analytics, data storage, for the historical data, because you will lose that. So you definitely want to make sure to store it somewhere before the cutoff date happens. So all right. So how do we do data-driven decisions? So I'm going to go through like a quick example here. This is based on real scenario, right? I was talking to a bunch of media companies, and one thing that they want to do is they want to always know like when to institute a paywall. And I wanted to use this example because it's easy to follow along. So you want to institute a paywall on your favorite, media company, whatever, newspaper, news outlet, or New York Times, Washington, whatever, like whatever you read, right? You want to know like, okay, do I put a paywall or not? So how do you determine this? Well, some people will just use an industry benchmark, and we see this across a lot of industries. And in this case, they had like some sort of benchmark where it's like a certain number of users returning to the website a number of times within a month. So if you have 5,000 users that come every three times a month, then you should do it, for example, or whatever, right? But the problem with using industry benchmark is there's a lot of flaws, right? So one of the problems is technical flaws, first of all. So user tracking itself is very non-definitive. The way user is tracked is by the cookie ID. Now that could vary across devices, right? Each device has different cookies. Actually, across browsers, if you use Safari and Chrome on like your Mac, for example, they have different cookies. They don't share cookies, so that's going to be two different users. And even the same browser, if you launch the same browser in incognito, it doesn't pull from your regular browser cookies. So that's actually two users. So one person, depending on their browsing habits, could actually be 4 users or 5 users. That's why, personally, I don't like using users all that much. Sessions is a little bit more accurate because it's somewhat more definitive. But anyhow, there's also strategic flaws in this. So user frequency is not necessarily a direct sign of engagement. I mean, in this example, they could actually be coming a lot because they're trying to circumvent the paywall. Like some people do that, right? But in general, it's just because they come a lot doesn't mean that they do anything. They could end up there from emails and just leave or whatever. Doesn't mean that they engaged. And different audiences might have different appetites or behavior, right? So just because there's an industry benchmark, it can just vary. Like, for example, you hear a lot in like e-commerce. It might be like, hey, you're in apparel e-commerce. We do a lot of work there. You're in apparel e-commerce. You should be at this metric here. Well, like maybe, but like maybe not. Maybe your audience is more high-end or more mass market or more whatever than whatever the metric is based on, and they respond a little bit differently than what the industry is, right? So that could be different. It's not accounting for that here. And then doesn't account for how users are just going to react, right? Maybe they all love this idea, maybe they all hate it. Doesn't really account for that. So what do you do? Well, we can A/B test, set up an A/B test, and we can use Google Analytics to like help us do that. You can have a group without a paywall, a group with a paywall, and do it at the same time. And this is where you're going to use events. You can use an event to trigger when a paywall would show, and configure other events to track key metrics. And you want to configure what you want to exclude as well. So configure a login event so that you can exclude certain things. People that log in, you don't want to be part of the test. And then you have key metrics that you're going to look at to determine the success or lack thereof. And when you go into Google Analytics, you can use the same Explore tool and you can create segments, which is very powerful. And each segment, you can define it based on sessions or users or events. We're going to define it here based on sessions, right? So you could come in here, create a session, and basically say something like, we want to look at people that got the paywall, and basically have the event here where paywall is true, and and where they weren't logged in. And then another segment where people who didn't get the paywall, people where they didn't get the paywall, and then they weren't logged in. And then compare both of those across, right? And see. And then you're going to have like a business goal on like, hey, every X users is worth Y, or every 10 users is worth whatever. And based on these goals, you're going to have a business model that says whether this was a success or not. And you're going to decide based on the data, which I have some examples here, but I'm going to go through that. So It doesn't end here though. It's not a one-time thing. Testing is a constant state, not a one-time event. Things are always changing, always dynamically, changing every day. You always want to be testing, reviewing data, and informing. So you want to set up your methodology with the right business metrics, the right tracking, the right tools in place. You want to test, and then you're going to get some data. You're going to make some decisions based on that data, and you're going to keep doing that. And that's how you improve. And that's where like true sustainable improvement and growth matters. That's part of that data-driven decision framework. Need help with this? You're like, hey, pull the SOS button. This is a lot. Again, feel free to reach out. We have our link right here. Any business data strategy, driving growth with data, A/B testing, any of that we can help with as well. So, all right. So beyond GA, I mean, your tech stack has different things. We talked about HubSpot being like here in your backend, and you want to like leverage different things with each other and integrate them holistically to be able to get your full 360-degree strategy. So maybe you have HubSpot, maybe you're using a different email tool, you could be using HubSpot, maybe using Google Analytics, maybe you're bringing all this information into like a central database, and you have like some reporting that's like giving you, reporting access across the entire customer journey for like what happens between A and B. And that allows you to drive deeper insights, like maybe how your email engagement corresponds with your webinar signups, how your ad performance affects your blog traffic, maybe how your blog traffic affects consultation books. So things from different places that you can inform like more broad business decisions when you have this integrated strategy. There's other tools that exist like Hotjar and stuff like that. I just put that here as I mentioned. But this segues me into HubSpot marketing reports, which we're going to have Sam talk about. There's a lot of cool new stuff here. So the tech stack, if we go back to this diagram, again, we said Google Analytics sits here. Well, HubSpot sits here on the back end side. And people always want to ask, and some people ask about like, how do I use both together? How do I incorporate both with each other? So people always want to know like, when does one play in and when does the other play in? So the easy way to say it is, so Google Analytics will track people the second they come to your website, and it's good for aggregate tracking. So how much traffic do I have coming from social? How many sessions, right? It's good for that, but it is not individualized. And even if you could individualize it with events, do not do that because you will get terminated by Google, right? So do not do that. It's against the terms and conditions. So it is not individualized. You don't know that Sam filled out a form or did something, right? You just know that 20 people filled out a form, right? Now, HubSpot also tracks users, but once they identify somehow, which is either through filling out a form, booking a meeting, clicking on a link on email that you might have sent, HubSpot will take that information and tie it back to the cookie. So they store like all the cookies of Sam visited from different places. Anytime he fills out a form, they're going to be like, oh, okay, we see that, this email, that's Sam. So let's tie it back to Sam and put all that history in the record. So it actually goes back retroactively. So that's why if you have HubSpot, when somebody fills out a form, then all of a sudden you see, oh, they filled out this website and that website and that website, because before that HubSpot didn't know who they are, but they maintain the cookie so that they can, thread it back retroactively. So this is great for analyzing what individuals are doing and what like certain cohorts are doing, which is not something you could really do in Google Analytics. So you might be like, okay, I want to see how many people with VP titles came to my website or did this or whatever. Well, you can do that in HubSpot. You can't do that in Google Analytics. Okay. And remember, you need both, right? They both work together. One is more like on the front end, one is on the back end. Google does track even after they sign up in HubSpot. But again, at that point, you can do more things in HubSpot by leveraging that piece. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sam, and Sam's going to tell us some stuff here. And I have a bunch of questions that I'm going to also try to answer in parallel.
All right. Thank you, Moustafa, for the smooth handoff. I'm going to take the screen share here quickly. I'm going to go through a few slides, and I do have a kind of live demo portal set up so we can actually see what the reports look like and how you build them and kind of how intuitive that piece is. All right. Now, based on the survey we did before this call, we have a lot of marketers on the call, a lot of VPs, a lot of folks who directly impact the overall revenue of an organization. And we know right now, this year, last year in particular, things have been a little tough out there, right? So these are some of the challenges that HubSpot has identified amongst our target audience, namely marketers, people who are, attributed to driving revenue. And really the theme we found is that folks are trying to do, more and keep driving revenue with fewer resources, budgets that have been diminished, teams that have become smaller, that sort of thing, and just being expected to produce the same level of results. So we're going to cover a few reports today, and these reports really try to meet that goal and make your lives easier and kind of prove your worth and, just make it you marketers indispensable for the organizations. So the two features we're going to talk about today, I'm going to skip this slide in the essence of time, are ones that you might be relatively familiar with. And we'll try to overlay this with the Google Analytics information we've talked about, how you can use both. Because they really are, two sides of the same coin. Like Moustafa said, GA4 is going to give you overall trends and volume, but they're not going to tell you, who these people are and really what gets them to tick. That's the side of the coin that HubSpot is going to fill in and give you information on. So the two reports we'll touch on today are multi-touch revenue attribution, MTRA, for people who like acronyms. This is very high level, macro level information about your different marketing channels and how those channels do at driving revenue across different models of attribution, which are common in the industry. So that one's relatively straightforward. The next one we're looking at is relatively new. It's called Customer Journey Analytics, where we're basically taking your marketing funnel, turning it on its side and getting a really clear view of how folks are going through the funnel, how efficiently they're doing so, how folks are dropping off, are people taking shortcuts, that sort of thing, all for the sake of efficiency and making sure that you're spending, these smaller budgets wisely and really optimizing that journey to increase revenue. So a quick slide on multi-touch revenue attribution. Again, this is a set of models that we use to attribute revenue to various marketing channels and marketing efforts your team might be utilizing. You can see some of these different models here, and we'll dig into these in just a minute. But really, it's there to help you, of course, prove your worth, but make more strategic decisions around these channels, and understanding that the channel that drives the most traffic might not actually be creating the most revenue. Right? There might be some discrepancies there, which we can illuminate. The next one we're going to look at is this fun-looking chart over here. This is Customer Journey Analytics. Again, this is taking your marketing funnel, turning it on its side, and then looking at how folks are converting and flowing through that funnel and trying to identify, shortcuts and ways to optimize this to get folks through even quicker with, a really great buyer experience. So the reporting builder in HubSpot is extremely intuitive. You basically click a button that says reports on your home screen. It would take you right here. From here, you can build all the reports that you've come to know and love, single object reports, multiple object reports, and then you can see some of our newer customer journey analytic reports and attribution reports. And stay tuned in future webinars for a bit more about how HubSpot is utilizing AI across our entire platform, because it's extremely exciting. And I think for marketers especially, it's important to embrace and hopefully utilize AI to make your lives easier and all that. So let's start with customer journey reports. I'm going to show you what the builder looks like. So I, click this. It would take me to a screen that looks like this, right? Now, Moustafa spent some time earlier talking about different events and that sort of thing that Google tracks. Rest assured, you can track all those within HubSpot as well. So if I scroll down to events here, if my ideal path for somebody to convert into a lead is, open a free trial with us, set up your free account, do something in the app, right? Create a project, whatever it might be, and then contact sales, right? I would basically drag those steps over here to paint that journey that I expect folks to take, right? So we've got all your custom behavioral events, but we also have all the other components of HubSpot, whether it's sales focused or customer support focused, or they clicked on an email that your marketing team sent, fill out a form. All those can be taken into consideration when building these funnels. Cool. All right, so let's take a look at a real live one. This one's pretty basic. We'll get into a bit more complex one on the next slide. But here we're looking at the flow of the scenario that I basically just laid out on our last screen, which is what we as a team envision as the ideal path somebody takes to utilize our product and embrace it and become users, right? So here, the first step that we anticipate is that they click on the free trial button on our website or app or whatever it might be, right? We can view the amount of people who did that here. For the next step, we want to have them create an account, right? So they have the free trial. Now we want them to give us their information and create an account. And we can see between those two steps, the exact number of people out of the 2,700 we started with about 1,400, 50% or so, made it to that next step, and it took them an average time of 5 minutes to do so. All right. Next, we want them to watch this onboarding video. A fair amount less do that, but you can still see the flow here, how many folks are dropping off. And ultimately, we want them to create a project within the system, which indicates to us that they're, a good person for the sales team to reach out to. And it's, very simple to drag and drop new steps or create a if-then branch. So maybe they created a project or they created an account and they created an account, right? But it's very easy to add those steps and then update the report to get that information. Cool. All right, so that's just one example, if you will. To our point earlier about actually identifying these people, right? Google Analytics is not allowed. They're not gonna be able to track who these actual individuals are. With HubSpot, we own that first-party data. We know who these people are. We can track them across all of our different channels, and you can literally see, their names, click into their profile, see what pages they've been to previously. Have they talked to sales? Have we done business with them? Right. So it's kind of a full circle view of that individual customer in kind of a broader context of this journey. Cool. All right. So that's the first one. Next one's a bit more complex. This is more of your classic, right? How are they converting from the landing page I built to actually booking time with a salesperson? Obviously, a very important metric. Sales is always like, hey, our leads suck. They aren't booking, right? This is going to show you and prove that they actually are converting and meeting with your team. So here it gets a little bit interesting. It's a very similar story, right? We kind of paint this journey. We want to see if they open emails. If we enroll them in a sequence, how are they progressing there? But in this one, you can start to see some divergences, right? Where some folks are actually skipping from form submission all the way to booking time with the sales rep, right? And I can literally click in to see who these two people are. What pages did they click on previously? I can pull up my Google Analytics data and overlay that to see what they did before they became a HubSpot lead, right? And just have all this information to see, how can I replicate this? How can I find more Maggies to completely skip these 5 steps and book time directly with my team, right? This is kind of a longer journey, but you can get as complex or as simple as you'd like. And you can also include, the percentage of folks dropping off, which adds some additional complexity to the branches, which is pretty neat. So you can see those drop-offs there. All right. So pretty powerful stuff just when it comes to, kind of assessing the efficiency and productivity of certain marketing campaigns. If you want to view this in different ways, we have all of our fun different charts you can look at. And there are different ways we can utilize this for like your deal stage funnels and other areas of HubSpot beyond just marketing, which is pretty neat. All right. So I'm going to leave that there. Again, we're happy to spend more time on this, kind of show you how this would work for you on a follow-up call. With the 4 minutes we have left, I'm going to quickly shift gears to multi-touch revenue attribution, which I think is equally as important, very different, but I think, again, you kind of need both. Now, attribution is a bit different. We know these reports can be hard to build. They can be finicky. So the way we approach this is actually by addressing most of the common questions that we've heard from our customers that they want to see answers to, right? So attribution reporting, you can see, from a contact perspective, how are we doing at driving leads from a certain campaign or a certain asset? How are we doing at driving conversions into actual sales qualified opportunities, right? That sort of thing. And then the most important to a lot of people would be, how is this specific campaign or asset or ebook I just wrote contributing to my bottom line and revenue, right? And it's very hard to just attribute that out of the box, which is why we give you different models. Some of you might be familiar with these models. If you're not, we can cover more of them together when we speak next. But this is an example of an attribution report, which is basically telling you down to the dollar amount how much revenue was driven by your different channels. Now, if you're newer to HubSpot, we're basically pulling in all your different marketing efforts into a single place, whether that's blogging or emails or social or chat. It's all going to be reportable right from here. And then you can manipulate it across these different models here, where we're kind of assigning credit to different portions, which gives you some different insights. So if we have more time, I could spend a lot of time on this, because gets me really fired up, because I think this is like one of the most important things marketers can do in like proving what value they're bringing. So this is just a very quick example, but in the essence of time, I wanted to wrap it up. Finally, as many of you know, all these reports, you can just add them right to a dashboard. So instead of having to go to like 10 reports every single day, you can have a handy little dashboard where all these reports flow in, and easily accessible right from here.
Awesome.
Yep. 2 minutes left.
Really good stuff. And honestly, there's a lot you could do with Marketing Hub in general. And if you set up your events a certain way, I mean, some people were asking about kind of how to do these like events. You set up your events a certain way where you have harmony between your Google Analytics and your HubSpot events. You can really, have good fidelity on both ends until what's happening in your business. If you need any help with this or any of this HubSpot stuff, feel free to reach out to us. Again, same QR code, put the link in the chat as well. More recently, I think Zoom wasn't sharing it with everybody, so you should check the chat now, and you should be able to see it. And some people have already used the QR code to book. So you can either use the QR code to book, or find it from the chat. We can help you. We can jump on a call, get Sam on a call if it's a HubSpot thing, and kind of go into more details. So thank you guys for coming. I'm going to put up again the wonderful QR code here. Feel free to book. We see some bookings coming in still, so feel free to book. And I think we got to most of the questions. There's a couple more. If you didn't get your question answered, feel free to book, and happy to just jump on a call and answer your questions, talk through it. And I believe so